Hi, everybody. How's it going? Excellent. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Jarett Wieselman. I work for BuzzFeed, and I'm here to lead a conversation with the star, co-writer, and co-producer of the film you just watched, The Bronze, ladies and gentlemen, Melissa Rauch.
Hi. How's everyone doing? This is really embarrassing. My feet don't touch the floor. I'm going to sit up so I'm not looking like a child.
It's like the Lily Tomlin
Exactly.
sketch. Thank you so much for being here, Melissa. Congratulations on the film, by the way.
Thank you.
It's so funny.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Doc.
I want to start by sort of going back with The Bronze. You and your husband co-wrote this film together. What was sort of like the inception for you both about this screenplay?
So it originally started at a mall in New Jersey, where I'm from, very small town Jersey. And the seed of the idea started years ago. We've always been fascinated by celebrity and celebrity in a small town specifically and what that can do to the psyche. And years ago, I was out of work. I had been on like a talking head type show on VH1. And I went back to New Jersey, and the guy at Wetzel's Pretzel gave me a free pretzel. And I was so excited, and I was with my now husband, and we were riding high on that pretzel. It was very exciting, and I was really feeling myself about that pretzel. And then the show I was on was canceled. I was out of work, and I went back to the mall, and the guy who gave me the pretzel pretended like he didn't know me. And I was in such a bad place being out of work at the time as it was, that him ignoring me, it was just rubbing like pretzel salt in my wounds. And so we just started talking about celebrity at that point and how it's just this really warped sense of reality. And then from that, we started talking about what would happen if this happened to a young girl, and especially in the world of gymnastics, you peak at the age that most of us are essentially starting to find ourselves. So we wanted to tap into that, and then the character was birthed out of that.
This is the second project you and your husband have written together. You wrote a short film together as well. Mm-hmm. And one of their audience members, Elizabeth, was wondering, how has your writing process evolved and changed since you began working together?
It's been interesting. We met in college, and we started as writing partners in college, and we wrote sketches together at the time. And we wrote a play together in New York, which was our first produced thing, called The Miseducation of Jenna Bush, where I played George Bush's daughter, and it explored the Bush presidency through Jenna's eyes. And that was our first experience working together on a professional level. And then when we moved out here, we shot The Condom Killer. And I think because we are also a couple, we now have much more of a shorthand. When we got together and we were not dating at the time, it was a lot of like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. That's so funny. So can we think of something else? And now it's like a lot of like, we can do better. No, funnier. We can make it funnier. We can make it stronger. So I think there's still very much a mutual respect for each other, but I think right now like the BS has been cut out, and we can sort of finish each other's sentences, which is nice.
You know, you, with this film, have done a lot, what a lot of actors hope to do, which is sort of, if the material doesn't exist for you, create it for yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, how important is it to you to, not only be an actor sort of for hire, but someone who can produce their own material?
It's super important to me, and I think it's something that I realized early on when I was living in New York for a while and auditioning, and I really wasn't getting any opportunities, and I started doing stand-up, and that was a way of me to remember why I was doing this in the first place, because I think a lot of times as an actor, you're not given the opportunity to do what you love, and it's so frustrating, and it creates this sense of, for me, I would be depressed all the time, and I was waiting tables, and you forget why you're hustling because you're not given the opportunity to do it. And so I started doing stand-up as a way of, okay, if I'm not being given the opportunities, at least I know I have an appointment to get on stage and remind myself why I'm doing this. So that was the first incarnation of it. And then we wrote the Jenna Bush play for myself, because I was doing pretty much just like talking head commentary as a stand-up and doing like weird theater in the basement of laundromats and stuff. So we wrote the play as a way to help me get some more opportunities. So I've always used writing as a way to really write myself out of whatever box I was in. And so with The Bronze, I'm so grateful for the opportunity I had with Big Bang Theory, and I love every second of it. It's a dream job, but I wasn't really getting the film roles I wanted, and if this was written by someone else, there's no way I would have ever played this role. And even still, the process of making it, when we first started sending the script out, we had a lot of interest from producers, and I can't tell you how many calls we got of, we love this script, we want to do it, but we want to put a huge name in this role. And so, and it was tempting. I so wanted to get traction as a writer, so we thought about it, but I kept on thinking about Sylvester Stallone in Rocky and how he held on to it. I was like, this is my Rocky, I gotta do it. And I actually met Stallone at a party last year, and I'm normally the type that will hide in a corner at a party and too afraid to say anything to anyone. But it was right before The Bronze came out, and I went up to him and I told him how much he was an inspiration to me and how he held on to it. And he was like, feels good, don't it? Feels good. I was like, it does, Sylvester. And he has like a neck like a sequoia tree. He smells wonderful too.
Now, unlike Rocky, what I thought was really interesting about Hope in The Bronze is she's coming at this fame from a place of, yes, I was successful, but even in the year I competed, I wasn't even the most successful.
Right.
You know, there's still 2 other people who did better than me in the one thing I was there to do, and I'm claiming all this fame from. I mean, what did you like about building a character who wasn't the gold medalist? You know, so even this sense of heightened importance has sort of this wink attached to it.
Yeah. You know, when we first started talking about this character and what her accomplishment would be, we kept on talking about how The Bronze is sort of this celebration of mediocrity, but at the same time, it's also this amazing accomplishment, but it's treated almost like a celebration of mediocrity in the sense that whenever you hear an Olympic announcer announce who won the bronze, it's always like, oh, and she'll have to settle for the bronze. Like, it's the 3rd best in the world. It's still amazing. So that was also important to us because when we were crafting this character, we wanted her to hang her hat on being so freaking proud of it. And she never once throughout the script or the movie does she nod to the fact that this isn't the best. She fully believes that this is the epitome of greatness.
I want to talk about a word that, to be quite frank, if you were a male actor, probably would not even come up in the conversation, and that's the question of likability of a character. In your process of getting this movie made, how much of the feedback that you got from people was, is she likable enough, though?
Thank you for asking that. Yes, a lot. You know, when you're in the process of editing the movie, you do these screenings where people fill out comment cards and give their opinions on things, and there was a lot of that. It was important to us. This character is not likable. That's it. She hates herself. So why should she? I know plenty of unlikable people. I've been unlikable in times in my life when I'm feeling like crap, and this character is stuck. She's miserable. And there's been times in my life where I felt stuck and felt like this is it. This is game over, and I'm sure I was not pleasant to be around, and that's what this character is, and she's an exploration of what happens when we're not happy with ourselves. And so there was different, and I have to say there's scenes in this movie that were cut where she's even more unlikable. They're on the DVD extras. So this is pulled back a little bit, but it was important to us that we didn't totally water her down so that she was just this character who's like sometimes a little prickly, you know?
Yeah. But, you know, it is interesting because there obviously is growth within the realm of the world, too. You know, she has it with Maggie. She has it with Thomas Middledish's character. But it's not like she becomes a new, better person. I mean, when you're thinking about the kinds of characters that appeal to you in that way, like what do you enjoy about playing people who can grow incrementally versus people who like start the film the Disney villain and then end the film like the Disney princess?
Right. And I think that's something we outline like crazy before we start actually writing the script. And when we were just breaking the story, it was very important to both Winston and I, my husband who co-wrote it with me, that we didn't put a big bow at the end of this. I mean, people take years and years in therapy working out their issues, and in an hour and a half to all of a sudden have this character do a total turnaround just didn't feel authentic to us. And it's one of the benefits you have also of not making a movie on a huge studio budget, is that you can keep things a little more controlled in how you want to make them. But with Hope, she's so messed up that when you're looking at how far she's going to grow, it did really have to be those baby steps, because she's really wasn't capable of much more. Maybe if there was ever a sequel in the future, we could take that to the next step. But she's limited. She's very limited.
One of the things that I found really interesting in the film is her voice. Obviously, for everyone who watches The Big Bang Theory, there's another voice there than the voice you have in your real life. And I'm curious to hear you talk about sort of finding the voice for the character and sort of what it was about what we hear in the film that worked for her.
I've always, in any character I'm playing, I've always sort of had to have a way into the character, and the voice has always been that for me. I was a really weird kid and super, super shy, and mimicking and doing weird celebrity impersonations as a kid was my way of expressing myself. So just vocal tone and voice has always been something that I can latch onto. And so when we were creating Hope, I knew I didn't want it to be as high-pitched as Bernadette's voice, but I still wanted a little bit of Arrested Development into her voice. And the fact that she's from this small town in Ohio. I grew up with, or not grew up, my college roommate was from a very small town in Ohio, and she spoke exactly like this, and everything was like, I'm gonna be absent from school today. And I had latched onto that early on in our friendship, and when we set this in Ohio, I was like, this character has to speak that way, because not only because I just find it entertaining, but the fact that her home is everything to her. Amherst is another character in the movie, and this character has, for so long, even though she went out into the world and did her thing, home is her heart. It's everything that she is. So we wanted to make the accent reflect that.
I mean, I would imagine with The Bronze less than maybe Big Bang, is there like a vocal strain that comes from that? Because I mean, on Big Bang, I mean, that is a very like high-pitched voice that you're probably having to do for hours on end.
It's that the voice that I'm doing is very similar to my mother's voice, except without her New Jersey accent. So I grew up imitating that all the time. So it's sort of a natural place for my register to be. Funny enough, like when I get sick or have laryngitis, speaking in Bernadette's voice is easier than speaking in this voice, because the placement of it, there's something about it that vocally is a little bit easier on my chords for some reason, which is not fun to be around, I'm sure, for my husband. If I'm like, I'm just going to talk like this for a little bit.
Obviously, you guys came at this with a really incredible script, and then a lot of the actors you hired are really gifted at improvisation and comedy in general. How much room did you allow for that kind of play on set?
We had a little bit of wiggle room for it. We shot this on a shoestring budget, 22 days in Ohio. It was so run and gun. Some scenes we only had one take of. We're like, okay, we got that. Let's move on, because we knew if we went overtime just even a tiny bit, we wouldn't have been able to make our days. So we made sure that we always got what was on the page, and then after that, if we had time, then we would improvise a little bit. There was some moments that made it to the movie that ended up coming out of those takes where we had a minute or two, but for the most part, it was really sticking to the script because we just didn't have a ton of time.
I mean, in general, what is your attitude towards improv? I'm sure on a network sitcom, there's not a ton of room for it there either. But given your comedy background, I would imagine it's something you have a faculty for.
Yeah, I love it whenever I'm given the opportunity to do it. It's so exciting to me, and I do come from an improv background, so I love it. And when we had those moments on set to play with the Bronze, it was great. For Big Bang Theory, it's 100% scripted, and because it's a multi-camera sitcom, the cameras are following us based on what is written on the page. So it's really letter for letter on that show, that was the first time I had, other than doing theater, Big Bang Theory was the first multi-camera sitcom that I ever had the opportunity to do. So that was something interesting when I first joined the cast. I was like, how much are we allowed? And it was nothing. So, which is great. And you don't really want to on that show. The writers do such a beautiful job of crafting these scripts that are very musical way. So really changing one note of it, the rhythms would be off for that show.
Yeah, I would imagine, when all of these different sort of platforms, these mediums, whether it's a multicam sitcom, a single cam sitcom, the film, a big budget film, it must always feel on some level like a different experience too, because you have to move differently and you have to sort of tweak your performance to the levels that would be appropriate for that. I mean, has that been an interesting thing to sort of wrap your brain around? Yeah,
it's very interesting. With Big Bang, it really feels like you're doing a play with cameras there. The live audience is so electric and so fun, and the energy's fantastic, and you really are feeding off the audience as you would in theater. And then versus the Bronze was a totally different experience, not only because I wrote it, so it was a lot of me running from behind the camera to shoot the scene, and of course it's just much smaller and controlled, and you're not really, and because we were working with such limited time, it felt very much like we were hustling the whole time. But I think the levels for multicam versus doing something like this, it's definitely, this feels much more intimate in a way, because not only were we shooting with a very small skeleton crew, just that form of filmmaking is just, it's much smaller.
What was the process like for you on The Bronze, where you're not only starring in the movie, but you're a co-producer, you've co-written it, so you sort of have to really be able to be in the moment and really quickly pull yourself out of it to sort of look at the picture as a whole. Well, how did you adjust to that?
It was interesting. I really didn't know how that was going to work until we were there, because it was the first time that we were filming something that we've written. So on that scale, it was intense. I mean, we were shooting like 16-hour days, and then we were going home and rewriting scenes based on locations. Like the scene in the mall, that was actually supposed to be in a drive-in movie theater, and we couldn't afford the drive-in movie theater. So I think it was like 2 nights before, Winston and I were up till 2 a.m, like just rewriting that scene. And it ended up being one of my favorite moments in the movie. And I was so grateful that happened, which is something that I really learned from indie filmmaking, is even though a lot of times you feel handcuffed by your budget, which is so exciting, is it forces you to do something that you may not have thought to do. And we ended up getting things from that. We wouldn't have been able to get them dancing together in the drive-in movie theater, and we ended up discovering more layers of the characters because we were forced to do that. So that was interesting. And then just being on set, it's interesting when you're writing a script, you think you know so much about the characters because you're creating them, and it's also a gift, because normally when you get a part, the first time you dive into it is when you get that script. So it was nice had lived with this character for so long. But was also really interesting was the characters that we created that I wasn't playing, when we got on set with them and we got to see them come to life. And so like Gary Cole, who is just absolutely incredible, and he's so amazing. And each I have to say, like, lucked out so hardcore with every cast member. They're all just amazing, and they lent their talents to this movie, really coming to Ohio to work for pennies. And they all brought something so unique and wonderful. And like Gary, he came in and he had such a backstory that he came in with for this character. And it wasn't until we were on set together, we really had no rehearsal time, that watching him enable my character, it brought so many levels to it that we knew that he was always an enabler of Hope and part of the reason she is the way she is. But when I saw it in action, it's like, oh, this is even more than I had hoped when we put it on the page.
I want to add, what's interesting is for a film that had, a really tight shooting schedule and, as you said, a low budget, there is a lot of intricacy involved when you choose gymnastics as the world to, sort of set your play in. And then you sort of take things to the next level and have probably one of the most memorable sex scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
Thank you.
I mean, ever.
Thank you.
When you're writing something like that, is that a moment where you're just like, I don't know if this is gonna work when we shoot it, but we're gonna shoot it?
100%. When we wrote that sex scene, we wrote it as, in the script it says, the most crazy, epic gymnastics sex scene ever. And it was in bold and with like 3 underlines and tons of exclamation points. And then we bullet pointed what we wanted to. It was the closest to porn that I will ever write. And then when we got to the production level, like I knew that I wasn't capable physically of doing that. So we thought, well, we'll shoot it someone in shadows. And then we found a phenomenal gymnastics coordinator who did all the stunts in the movie, which was also interesting to talk. After we went through what we would need for the gymnastic scenes, just the Olympic scenes, and then being like, also, we have this gymnastic sex scene. Could you help us with? And we found fantastic body doubles, which was also just such an interesting experience because to find someone, most gymnasts are my height, but we needed someone who is built like me with curves, which really gymnasts don't technically have cans. So we had to then, we thought, well, maybe we'll get a gymnast and then put some on her in sort of like a rubber suit. And that was originally what we did. And then last minute, we found this phenomenal body double who's a Cirque du Soleil performer. And when I got the email with her body, I was like, yes, that's what I want. And she was amazing. We had another phenomenal body double for Sebastian. And although you're seeing a lot of Sebastian, he completely went for it. He came down the hall in a robe and he was like, let's do this. And he learned the entire it's really a sex ballet. And he learned all the choreography for it. My husband always jokes, though, that when we were shooting it, because I kept on stepping in and out of the scene for the things that I couldn't do or that you wouldn't want to see me do. And so sometimes I would step out, but Sebastian would still be in. And I would be standing in front of the monitor watching, and Winston would be like, you're standing so close. Like, I've never seen you so close to a monitor. I'm like, I'm just making sure everything's okay in the proper places. But really, like, all the women on the set were just so gathered in front of that monitor.
Yes, it has been gifted to ad nauseum on the internet as well.
Thank you.
So I want to sort of go back a little bit. Did you grow up wanting to be an actor?
I did. Like I mentioned earlier, I was very weird and super shy, and I was obsessed with comedy at a very young age, and there was a Whoopi Goldberg special on HBO where she was doing a bunch of different characters, and I was obsessed. It was so good. There's a character that she did where she kept on pointing to her crotch and saying, "Over here," and I latched onto it weirdly as a 7-year-old and did it for show and tell. And so I would go into school doing weird bits that I should not have been watching. I did like a Richard Pryor stand-up set, and I was this weird kid in school who wouldn't talk, and then I would like be dropping F-bombs at show and tell. My parents would get phone calls. So it was always a way that I found of being able to connect with other people. I remember imitating Don Knotts from Three's Company, and to procrastinate going to bed and getting that first laugh from my father and feeling so excited and elated, and it was addicting. And so I think and then I started doing like school plays and community theater, and I think if I had told my parents that I was going to do something else, they would have been surprised, because it was always where I was the happiest.
So then you went to college in New York.
Yes.
What college did you go to?
I went to Marymount Manhattan College on the Upper East Side. It's a wonderful school. It basically looks like an old lady's townhouse. It doesn't look like a real school, but it is a real school, and they have a great theater program.
And what kind of theater did you study there?
So it was a conservatory program, and it's a great school, and they gave a phenomenal classical training program. So you got a BFA in theater arts, and I minored in musical theater, something steady to fall back on. and then that's also where I had always been writing, but really, while I was there, that was when I really started writing on the side and trying to create my own work while I was there.
When you were in school, I mean, when you were visualizing your career, as a college student, I mean, what did it look like to you at that time? What did you want it to be?
I always loved doing theater, so I thought that I would stay in New York for a while and do theater, and I was a TV junkie as a kid, so being on a TV show was always something that I wanted to do, but it was really always about the act of doing. I don't know that it was just a dream of being able to do what I love. So it was a bit abstract, as much as my childhood bedroom was plastered with all my favorite actresses. And it was such a mishmash of, it ranged from like Gilda Radner to Carol Burnett to Meryl Streep, Bette Davis. So it was really like across. And I actually had a very funny moment with Carol Burnett. I had a picture of her hanging up on my wall as a child, and that was just, her show meant everything to me as a kid. And I think I was 16, and I wrote her a letter saying how much I loved her. And I went to see her in Moon Over Buffalo on Broadway, and I brought her the letter. And I was standing outside after the show, and she came, or the stage manager came outside, and he said, "Oh, you're the little girl who wrote a letter. Do you want to come back?" And I was so excited, and I told my mom, I was like, "You can't say, I have so much that I need to tell her. I need to tell her how she's my inspiration, how I want to be an actress when I grow up." And she came out, and the only thing I was able to say to her, it was, "You were good." And then she's like, "Oh, thank you, sweetheart." And I went, "And I have a picture of you in my room." And she was like, "Okay." And she was so lovely. And then years later, this was it last year or the year before, at this, I think it was the SAG Awards last year, yeah, when she was presented with the Lifetime Achievement Award, I was like, oh, I could finally get a sentence out and tell her how much she meant to me. And once again, I went up to her and I was like, "I met you when I was 15, and I said I had a picture of you, and you took a picture, and I love you, Kevin." So I did it once again. Humiliated myself in front of my childhood idol again. So anyway, not to digress, but it was just this dream of watching women who were doing what they loved and looked like they were having the most fantastic time. So it was always about whether it was, I'm so grateful to be doing what I'm doing now, but whether it was this or I was having a wonderful time doing that theater in a laundromat. It was just about the act of doing and being happy doing it.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it goes without saying that, most actors are there because there's such a passion for the craft. But I mean, it is also, it can be extremely discouraging when that passion is not met with rapt applause every time. So I mean, after you graduated and you got into like the grind of auditioning, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was horrible. It's such tough stuff. I mean, I'm trying to think. So I graduated, I started doing stand-up, I was doing theater and auditioning, and I went through this period of time where I was doing stand-up and waiting tables, and I was also one of those people in New York that would hand out flyers on the street and in order to get stage time. and I had been, I guess I was in New York for about 7-8 years after school, and there was one night where I was handing out flyers and my hands were like all chapped and my face was bright red, and I was like, come see comedy, there's a good comedy show. And this little girl was coming out of, I think it was Lion King, with her mom, because it was the late show, and she looked at her mother and was like, Mommy, that is so sad. I was like, no, she's right. She's right. And then that was sort of what pushed me to come out here. I was starting to rot a bit there. And then I came here, and it was just a lot of driving around and crying in my car, and people telling me that I was not what they wanted in any form or fashion. And really, like, it's such a hard business, because like you were just saying, like I was saying earlier, it's in our heart. Like, it's what makes us happy. It's what, I don't think anyone gets into the acting business if it's not something that you truly love, because it's so hard, and you're constantly being punched in the face and being told that and it feels personal, and it's not, but it feels so personal, and it doesn't seem to ever end, the feeling of rejection in any way. And I talk to other actors at every different level, and everyone still feels like they're being punched in the face in some way. And what I did learn making The Bronze, which was really interesting, was because, sometimes you leave an audition and you feel so good, and you're like, oh, this is great, this part feels so right, and of course other times you leave auditions, you're like, I hate myself, why did I not do better? But sometimes you feel like, oh, this is so great, and it felt so great in the room, and then you don't get it, and you feel so terrible, and you're like, what did I do wrong? And it feels like such a big rejection. But when we were doing auditions for the movie, there were so many times when people came in and they were amazing, so good, and I was so moved watching them, and it just came down to, it wasn't exactly right, or maybe like the people who were financing it didn't fully feel that they were the right. There's always 1,000,001 circumstances that could lead you to not getting that part, and that was something that brought me peace, just as an actor being on the other side of it, of, oh, even though it feels so personal, it's really not. And so that's something that has brought me some comfort. I'm totally going on a tangent. I'm so sorry. But the question that you asked was how it was when I was on this road. And what I've also learned from this is that everything, even when it feels like a terrible rejection, there's always something after it. Right before I got Big Bang, the week before, I was at the unemployment office, and I was feeling terrible, and I had actually just been replaced on another show, and I thought that I would never, ever, ever work again, and I was devastated, because it was one of the first pilots I got, and I was just replaced, and that was it, and I was like, crap, I'm out of work again. And this is another lesson that I also learned. I hadn't had an audition in a really long time, and whenever you're trying to like get that next audition, it always feels bad because you feel like you're not worthy of it. And that week I made a phone call to my agents, and I was like, I need opportunities. And that's hard to do. It's hard to speak up for yourself sometimes. And because I did that, I got the audition for Big Bang. And had I not done that, I don't know that I ever would have got that audition. And it's hard. It's really hard, because when you're feeling beaten down and dejected, to call someone and say, believe in me, it sucks. And so I was very grateful that week I got the balls up to do it. Anyway.
With Big Bang Theory, what's so interesting is the character of Bernadette came in as guest or recurring. I mean, and it evolved into a series regular. And so I'm curious, for you, when you go into an audition and it is guest or recurring, do you kind of have to approach it as, I'm going to invest as much in this person as I would knowing that she could be someone I play for 7 years?
I went into it. I really liked the show before I came in, so I was really excited to be there in general. But I really, at that point, I was just so excited to have a paycheck that week. That I didn't see past it, and I loved the character. I thought what they wrote for the audition scene was so exciting, and it was different than other stuff that I had played. So I was just excited to get the opportunity to maybe have a paycheck, and then I was also just really excited whenever you get an audition that you're like, oh, this is something fun that even if I just get to play it for this week. Yeah, and I'm not even talking about getting the part, just like getting to play it for the audition. Like, this is so fun, and it'd be fun to work on it this week. So that I went into. It was a pre-read with the casting directors because I never met them, and there was so many people there, and I was like, this is such a freaking long shot. So I decided at the last minute to do the voice, and I had glasses in my bag because I was like trying to separate myself from the other actresses that were there. But I at that audition, I was really just thinking like, well, this is the one time that I get to play this part, and I was feeling kind of crappy, and it's like, well, this will be fun, and so I was looking forward to just having fun playing it in that moment, and then when I found out that I got the part, at that point they had said maybe one episode, maybe two. At that point, I was like, I'm not getting my hopes up for anything anymore. So I didn't really think of it past that point. And I think I did a handful of episodes that season, and then went through another pilot season and another couple of jobs that didn't really go anywhere. And then they brought me back on as series regular the next year, which I'll eternally be grateful for.
I want to return to the idea of the voice you chose for her, because you said it's your way in, and it's such a specific voice you use on the show. So I'm curious what it was about that tone that helped you find her. In
the original audition sides, she and Howard had bonded over the fact that they both live with their mothers. And there was also reference to the fact that her mother still dresses her, and that she was very much under her mother's thumb. So similar to Hope, I thought, well, this is someone who's in a bit of arrested development, so I thought her voice would be higher and more little girl-like, because there was reference to how her mother dressed her like a child. So that's really where that came from. And then it's gotten like a little, I think the tone of the voice kind of found itself like the third episode in, but it was very much a choice based on just that first audition, the first handful of sides that I got.
Love that. We were talking before about the difference in working in all of these different mediums, and I'm curious what you feel like you've learned as being an actor working in a multicam universe.
It's interesting. I think being from a theater background definitely helped, because it really, like I mentioned earlier, does feel like a play. I think what's been interesting is that the way that we work on the show is that we rehearse Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and each night we get a new script. We do a run through at the end of the day, each day, and the writers then adjust and give us a new script that night for the next day. And then Monday, Tuesday, we do a pre-shoot on Monday of anything we can't shoot live. And then the live show is on Tuesday. And what's been interesting is seeing how the scripts do change and evolve. And it's something that I learned and took with me on The Bronze when we were shooting. The writers are they're so fantastic on Big Bang. And during the live taping, they will, if the audience doesn't give us the biggest possible laugh, they'll go back and try again until the laugh is exactly where they want it. And although we didn't have that with obviously a live audience with The Bronze, if just it didn't feel 100% right in the scene, Winston and I would converge on the side and figure like, okay, this is what we could tweak. We could tweak here and there to make it the best that it can be. And that's been a great lesson from the Big Bang writers.
Absolutely. With the film, it was so well received this year, and it did, really great on the festival circuit and DVD. And I'm curious, like, has that emboldened you to sort of stick to this path of writing sort of atypical characters for yourself, in the sense that these are not women I feel like we're seeing a lot represented in Hollywood film, be it mainstream or independent cinema. Is that sort of what you like to create for yourself?
Absolutely. I've always been drawn to characters that can be labeled unlikable, as we were talking about. And even growing up, just watching movies like Betty Davis, she plays unlikable characters so often, and it's been interesting when you look at the character she plays, like in All About Eve. She's very much an unlikable, flawed character, and I don't know where we've started to take a step back as a culture and label these women as unlikable and flawed. And there's and I feel in TV more so there's been a movement towards really creating more of those characters, and I think actresses have been fortunate enough to create like Damages is a fantastic example of like just so flawed in every way, and no apologies are made for it. And I think there's great roles for unlikable women in TV, and I think it's a little harder in film, especially studio film. I feel like they sometimes shy away from it. So those are the roles that excite me as far as what we're creating, and the next project we're working on now. It's different than this, but it's definitely another female character who has her own bag of issues.
In closing, you've given so much great advice already on this panel, but obviously you have a room full of actors in front of you. Is there anything that you as a performer sort of continue to return to either keep going or to motivate yourself, or just a piece of advice you would want to impart?
I think it's really just the reminding yourself of why you're doing it, I think, is really important, because I think it's so hard, and I think we could all feel beaten down at different points, and there's nothing that feels better than the act of doing. So whether it be going and taking a class at UCB, or writing something for yourself, or putting on a show with a group of friends, or writing just a short film, even if it's a 5-minute short that you shoot on your iPhone, just to remind you of, oh yes, this is the fire inside me that wanted to do this in the first place. That's what's important, because I feel like the business side of it just gets so murky and hard, and it's easy to forget why you did it in the first place.
Absolutely. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to all of you for coming out, and to the SAG Foundation.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, guys.